Welcome to the Channel Talent Workshop Immigration and Integration in France in Song and Film. My name is Gabor Gelleri and I'm lecturer in French at the Department of Modern Languages at Aberystwyth University. In today's talk, ahead of the live session, I would like to initiate a discussion on the topics of immigration, racism, identity and integration and the related symbols through a series of extracts from songs and films. You will find a list of the video links at the end of this talk and also on the Word document that accompanies this recording. As a start, however, I would like to share a somewhat unusual document, a brand of tea. The high-end French tea company Mariage Frères created in 1997 a tea called Exposition Coloniale. Colonial exhibitions were held between the second half of the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century in various countries in order to promote colonial trade, colonial identity, and generally the great deeds of colonization. They also often featured human zoos, exhibitions where human beings were shown in pretend habitats such as an African village, like they were animals in a zoo. The tea company Mariage Frères claimed that they referred through the expression colonial exhibitions to a feeling of cultural exchange and diversity. However, were the colonial exhibitions really spaces of exchange? There was considerable backlash against this tea brand, and after a lengthy debate, the company finally withdrew it. Symbols such as calling a tea colonial exhibitions can be very powerful in shaping identities. The French West Indian writer and psychiatrist Frantz Fanon discovered his own identity through the eyes of the French, and particularly expressed by the publicity of the chocolate brand Banania, which gave incorrect French words into the mouth of the black person represented. As Fanon said, I discovered myself to be an object among other objects. I discovered my blackness, my ethnic characteristics, and in particular, Yabon Banania. Banania still exists, but the slogan Yabon has been withdrawn more recently. But symbols also can be symbols of peace, of compromise, of the work of dealing with a difficult past, such as in the case of the Nantes Memorial to the abolition of slavery. Inaugurated in 2012 in Nantes, as it was the most active slaving trade station in France, you can see on the image that the shape of the memorial corresponds to that of the inside of a slaving galley. So descending into the memorial gives a little bit the impression of descending into one of those boats, to some extent sharing the experience. At all moments of colonization, there was a movement of people from the colonies towards metropolitan France in search of work and of opportunities, because there were very few opportunities in the exploited colonies. This movement became very particularly important during the period called in French the 30 Glorieuses, the 30 glorious years of economic development between 1944 and 74, the liberation of France and the petrol crisis. The exponential growth of French economy during these times made it necessary to welcome large numbers of workers from colonies and then later from former colonies. The attitudes in France itself were not always necessarily friendly. A protest of Algerians in 1961 was violently attacked by the police of Paris, leading to several deaths. It was only a few weeks ago, which was actually the 50th anniversary of this, that the French state finally acknowledged its responsibility in this. Against the backdrop of racism in France, took place in 1983, the Marche des Beurs, the so-called March for Equality and Against Racism, and in 1985, the SOS Racism campaign, Hands Off My Maid, Touche pas à mon pote. It was during this same period in the 1980s that we see the first expressions of integration and of a possible new mixed identity in songs and films. For those who were of Northern African origin, the new identity of being an Arab in France was often designated by the word beurre, which is a slang word, a verlan slang word, where the consonants in a word are interverted and an E sound is added between them. So it is the verlan version of the word Arab. The most famous expression of this new Beur identity was the song Douce France by the band Carte de Séjour. This song was actually not written by Carte de Séjour, but by famous French singer Charles Trenet in 1943. At one point, it was actually compulsory for all French children to learn it. However, when it was second-generation immigrants who sang it, lines such as France, sweet land of my childhood, with a very, very different musical background. This is this sort of mixed North African and French music that will be known under the name Rai. It took an entirely different dimension. The launch of this song in 1986 was quite an event. The then Minister of Culture, Jack Lang, actively participated in its promotion. But the song also has an important afterlife. Lead singer Rachita had a song in 1993, Voilà, que ça recommence, which criticized the return of fascism all over what he called the Douce France. So he was reusing the line of his very famous song in order to criticize the return of racism and fascism in France. Most families of immigrant backgrounds settled first in shanty towns, then in suburban communities known as cités. An entire range of films, songs, and books explored life in these communities, in particular after the 1970s, with the end of the Trente Glorieuses, when unemployment affected these communities very seriously. Bertrand Blier's Un, deux, trois soleils in 1993 explored this universe and the theme of integration, exclusion, racism in a stream of consciousness approach typical of this director, who already held an Oscar from 1982 for Préparez vos mouchoirs. In Blier's film, actually, we see several generations of immigration meeting, from earlier European immigrants to France, such as Italians, to the most recent arrivals. So here we see a young boy coming from the Comoros who is coming to steal in the house of a French person who actually appears only in this single scene of the film, played by famous French actor Jean-Pierre Mariel.
Pourquoi vous êtes gentil avec moi comme ça? Les autres me tirent dessus quand je vais voler chez eux.
T'as qu'à pas voler chez les autres. T'as qu'à voler que chez moi. Comment tu t'appelles?
Taj Touching.
T'es né dans la cité?
Oui, bâtiment F, appartement 318.
Et tes parents, ils sont nés où tes parents?
Au Comores.
Dans l'océan Indien?
C'est des îles.
Tu es la chance de mon pays, Tadjoudine. Quand tu seras grand, il faudra que tu te maries avec une Française. Et puis que tu lui fasses un petit. D'accord?
D'accord.
So this unnamed French person invites the young boy to come and steal from him, and invites him to become the future of his country, that he is to marry a blonde French person, that they mix by having children of mixed origins. This idyllic image of integration, of diversity, however, is countered by the following scene when another robber who is trying to take someone from a person is actually shot. Many of you will be familiar with the 1995 film La Haine. Mathieu Kassovitz created it as a film that was almost seeking to be censored and forbidden. It was just like Les Miserables of Lajli, which we shall discuss later today, based on real-life events, police overreactions, and victims of such actions. And it is quite interesting how much both films echo in today's Black Lives Matter movement. Next to countless other important things, I would like to highlight here a scene which features an expression of a mixed identity and at the same time of the lack of hope that the community represented has to live in. The two songs that are skillfully mixed here is, on the one hand, Edith Piaf's Non Rien de Rien with the central line, I don't regret anything, and Supreme NTM's Police, which discuss police brutality, racism at every level of legislation, and discussed themes such as youth violence, which are the key themes of the entire film La Haine. In this scene, we see the mixing of two genres of music, two ethnicities, although Edith Piaf, who is considered to be the iconic French artist, was actually herself one-quarter Algerian. Two periods are mixed, traditional France with modernity, and this happens while we are getting a panorama of this barren urban landscape of hopelessness. 1998 is usually recognized as a key moment of hope, of possibly successful integration, and the symbol of this was the victory of France at the Football World Cup. The theme of very mixed origins was nicknamed Black Blanc Bleu, and the hopes of a successful mixed France were strongly linked to it. In the same year, the group Zebda expressed both hope and difficulties in the hit song Je crois que ça va pas être possible. Zebda shot into fame in 1995 with the song Le bruit et l'odeur, which criticized and even sampled a speech of racist undertones by then Mayor of Paris, later President Jacques Chirac, who was criticizing the kind of immigration which disturbs France by its sounds and smells. Different experiences were expressed by the song Je crois que ça va pas être possible. So this song explores racism in its most everyday form, the difficulties that people of immigrant origin encounter by getting in everyday actions such as getting entry to a club, renting a flat, as this part of the song explored, getting a loan. However, I would like you to think about what kind of symbols can we see behind the message of everyday symbol. What further themes and symbols are expressed in particularly the video clip itself, not simply the song. The focus of most explorations of immigrant and post-immigrant identity is the city, the suburbs, or what the French call the cité. However, there are some works that explore small town settings, and it was Caminet's briefly very popular song Marly Gaumont that explored what it means to be a person of color in those small villages that, as he says, even French people forgot exist.
Dédicacé à tous ceux qui viennent des petits patelins. Ces petits patelins paumés, pour qui personne n'a jamais rappé, même pas un flot. Ces petits patelins paumés que même la France, elle sait pas qui sont là chez elle. Les petits patelins paumés que personne ne connaît, même pas Jean-Pierre Pernaut. Je m'appelle Camini, je viens pas de la Tessie, je viens d'un petit village qui s'appelle le Marly Gaumont. Alors qu'on monte sur le beat 1 qui fait... À Marly Gaumont, y a pas de béton. 65 ans la moyenne d'âge dans les environs. Un terrain de tennis, un terrain de basket. 3 jeunes dans le village, donc pour jouer c'est pas chouette. Viens d'un village paumé dans l'Aisne, en Picardie, facilement. 95% de vaches, 5% d'habitants et parmi eux, une seule famille de noirs. Fallait que ce soit la mienne. Putain, un vrai cauchemar, j'ai dit à mon père. On aurait pu les s'installer à Moscou.
So in this song, Kameny explores the contrast between the experience of immigrant families in the suburbs. The cité also indicates several things that are related to identities, post-migration identities, such as the opportunities of sport. But he puts himself in a different position, himself being the only black in town, the only person of color in town, where he nevertheless encounters the same forms of racism, the same forms of I have no problem with people of color, but, and so on. Kameny himself never really made it in music after this song. He launched a couple of songs, but it never really had a music career. He became a comic and TV personality in the meantime. Issues of integration, exclusion, and identity continue to feature heavily in French arts. The final document I wish to mention today is Lajli's explosive 2019 film Les Misérables. You can find the full film on Netflix. Just like in La Haine, the central element of this film is a bavure, a police overreaction leading to a tragedy. Such even now internationally discussed within the Black Lives Matter movement are frequent, and so frequent that in one of the key scenes of the film, after the bavure takes place, all the children ran away shouting, "The police did another bavure." So here the fact that this very official terminology, which is definitely not normally within the language of children, is in everybody's mouth, shows that how much it is an everyday reality in their life. So this is the trailer of the film.
J'en appelle à votre esprit d'équipe, la cohésion. Sans cohésion, pas d'équipe. Et sans équipe, on est seul.
T'as pas choisi la bonne équipe, mon pote. Hein.
Contrôle de police. Vous faites quoi, là?
On attend le bus.
Vous attendez le bus, là? Ça sent le shit, ça.
Eh, c'est bon, c'est...
Je vous filme, vous avez pas le droit de faire ça.
Arrête de filmer.
Non.
T'es contente, là?
Ici, c'est notre vie. Toi, tu débarques, nous, ça fait 10 ans qu'on est là. On est les seuls à se faire respecter.
Eh les gars, soleil.
Ceux qui se respectent, tu me parles. Les gens d'ici, ils ont peur de vous, c'est tout.
C'est quoi l'histoire? Quand t'as volé un lion?
Ouais.
Mets la pression sur les pieds, faut qu'on retrouve le lion. Arrête-toi, là! Bouge pas, arrête-toi!
Vous n'éviterez pas la colère et les cris.
La galère, c'est qu'il y a un drone qui nous a filmés.
Qu'est-ce que tu me parles de gérer un drone, là? Il y a un gamin inconscient, là!
Je sais qu'on peut faire tomber la BAC avec cette vidéo sur vous.
C'est quoi votre problème, hein? C'est moi, la loi!
Donc t'es en train de m'expliquer quoi, là? C'est un accident?
Les petits nous lâchent pas depuis tout à l'heure.
C'est pas de votre faute. Comme d'hab, quoi.
Tu vas trop loin, là!
Et s'ils avaient raison d'exprimer leur colère, c'est moyen de se faire entendre aujourd'hui.
The closing sentence of the trailer, and what if expressing rage is the way to be heard today? This is a very strong contrast to La Haine, where many of you will know the protagonists decide to walk away from violence. This film in some way expresses the loss of hope and the difficulties that these communities continue to face. You could see that the opening scene of the film is the new victory of the team of France at the Football World Cups, which was meant to be a renewed 1998 experience that once again the successful France of mixed origins. But after this hopeful scene of opening, we go to the difficulties and to this world where everybody keeps manipulating children in every direction. The film itself closes on a quote by Victor Hugo: "There are no bad seeds, only bad cultivators." And by this quote, the director is firmly putting the responsibility for the children's aggression on those who let them down. Ahead of the live discussion later this month, I would like to leave you with these three questions. What themes and symbols of integration and of exclusion can we identify in these documents? Who is the target audience of these songs and films? To whom are the artists talking? And what can be the desired effect on the listener and the viewer? And finally, to what extent can we argue that these expressions of the immigrant experience, first, second, third generation immigrant experience, provide a crucial contribution to the national culture of France? Are these immigrants becoming part of French culture? Thank you very much for your attention. On this last slide, you can see the links and you can also find them in the shared document. Thank you very much and looking forward to discussing with you during the live event.